Delighted to introduce Caroline Ray to you, who is the Regional Director of Arup, the East African representative. She's a civil and structural engineer by trade, has done many different roles in many different sectors actually, but worked quite a lot in Africa, in Botswana, South Africa to mention a few, and has been based in Kenya for the last 5 years, 11 years in Africa. So without further ado, Caroline, please come and introduce your panel.
Thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. Yes, I've been working in Africa for the last 11 years as a designer in the built environment, and the topic that we're going to be discussing just now is how designers can work to bring efficiency into the build process, and how designers can lead the way into green buildings. And so I'd like to introduce the panelists, who are perhaps designers in their background, but are now working as developers, owners, financiers for projects in the built environment. We have Dhruv Pandit, who is CEO of the Fedha Group. He has a background in economics and banking, and has for the past 12 years been Chief Executive Officer for the Fedha Group, who are doing multiple developments within Nairobi and the rest of Kenya. We have Moses Kimani, who is an architect and urban designer. He has previously worked in Cape Town and Johannesburg in that field, and is a Green Buildings South Africa accredited professional. He is currently working on the owner side for Tatu City Limited. We have Prashant Kapoor, who some of us met yesterday, who is Chief Industry Specialist for in Green Buildings for the IFC. Prashant trained as an architect, but his interest in bioclimatic design and software has led him to develop IFC's EDGE tool, which many of us heard much more about yesterday, and to promote efficiency in the design of buildings. And last, Karen Koigi, who has 10 years' experience in the built environment and is currently leading due diligence and market research activities for Africa Logistics Properties. As a developer of, in this case, logistics properties and industrial properties, what are the benefits to the property owner of thinking about resource efficiency and green initiatives right from the start of the project?
It's long term. So it's how to make sure it's beneficial to, one, the developer, and two, the end user. So in terms of initiatives, I mean, we just got registered with IFC Edge as the first warehouse in Africa to be registered under IFC Edge. So it's a good thing in terms of just looking at how can we make our building more efficient long term, because we're going to be in the industry for a very long time. We need our warehouses to be as efficient as possible in the long run. So it's just looking at their criteria and making sure that we fit within that criteria. So certain things like different types of savings, whether it's in the water use, your energy savings, the use of certain materials, and it's also ensuring that you use the right consultants. I mean, we have Web Limited who have been guiding us through that process. So from the start, you start that process and you are mindful of the end and your end user. So it's looking at different components and making sure that they work. So for instance, instead of using normal lighting, you use LED lighting. Instead of you can use different types of roof materials just to make it easier. Lighting controls, we're using solar panels on top of our roof. So it just makes it more efficient in the long run. And in terms of cost, just making sure we can, whatever we install today is efficient and cost savings at the end for the end user as well.
Tatu City is a very long-term development, and when you're working with designers at the start of the project, as Karen has been saying, you can have all these fantastic ideas about what to incorporate in the design. But how do you make sure that those are actually realised at the end of the day, and it's not just great ideas at the start and somehow it falls by the wayside?
Tatu City is a master developer. So we're looking at the project 20, 30, 50 years from now, and we have many other private developers that come into the development who bring in their own consultants team. So for us as a master developer, one of the practical things that we have done is to come up with a development guidelines. And these development guidelines are over and above the requirements of a county council. Number two, we have taken away the process of approvals from the client's consultants, And therefore, we are able to control what developers are doing within Tatu City, just to make sure that they don't just do the minimum requirement for county, but that they do over and above that to meet our vision as a city. And what that has done is that it allows us to have that conversation with clients before they begin their project, because they will always come and ask us, what do we need to do? Now we own land, whether it's a small developer or someone building their own private home or a large-scale developer like ALP. It allows us to have that conversation at the beginning of the project. And so we start asking practical questions like, what is your plan for water? What is your plan for power? What are you going to do with sewer? What are you going to do with your storm water? So we are able to ask these questions at the very beginning. And then they come back to us once they have done their designs for us to scrutinize and approve what they do. Then it allows us to check if those things that they had said they would do are implemented in their design process. And at the end of the project, we also do certification for them. We will do a compliance certificate for them. So we are able to check again if the practical things they said they would do are implemented in their design. So that's how we're able to engage with them. Otherwise, a lot of people, when you start talking about green or efficiency, they don't understand and they just see it as an expense that they don't have to incur. So if we attack it from a guidelines perspective, then we are able to achieve much more.
You've overseen the development of a large, diverse portfolio of projects. What can the design process do to make a project really successful for you?
Basically, as a client, we've actually said that being sustainable actually should have zero net cost to us. Net additional costs. So the project cost is actually the same. And once you have the right team together who already are working closely right at the beginning and have the skills to actually think in that way, then magic happens. Right at the beginning at our new project, and we're already, I would say, 8 months away from completion, what we've seen is that yes, we've had to, as client, manage the cost savings on one side to be reinvested on the other side, but we're actually going to come under budget, slightly, very slightly under budget. But what it does for us in terms of thinking up front is actually that huge intangible of are we a quality project or not. And I think that's got to be the headline we've got to set, that we're a quality project. And through the thinking and using, in this case, the lead thinking methodology in this particular project, but we're also familiar with Edge on other projects, is that once it becomes a quality decision, then it becomes very easy, actually. And once you have the mindset that, hey, we've got savings here, let's trade it off for other investments, then, and we're reinvesting in quality all the time. Suddenly, we're not worried about the state of the market. The state of the market, is going to be a race to the bottom if you're going to talk about price. If you're talking about quality, then you can push through, build your brand, and do better in the future as well. So I don't really think I need to wait for 30, 40, 50 years. Sorry, life is too short.
IFC obviously puts finance into very many buildings in different places around the world, not just in sub-Saharan Africa. And you have a very diverse experience of seeing how design happens in different places in the world. Why should a financier be worried about the design process, or why should they care about the design process?
It's a good question in the sense that financiers are in the business of risk. That's what they do, right? They take risk. But they're also highly risk averse, particularly in the property space, which is seen as highly speculative. They want high expectations in terms of return because of the risk they're taking here. When it comes to financing, home buyers, affordable housing, and that sort of thing, they're worried that they may be taking on more than those people can actually take on. So they're worried about the increase in price and the cost creep because of that, and then it becomes not just unaffordable, but they're not able to return the money back. Through Edge and other means, try to tackle this, not just with the financial sector, but generally the whole sector. But one of the key things that we find that helps is this perception of cost. It's there across the board, and they don't want to push something out which their clients, the developers or home buyers, don't want, right? That's really the challenge. So it's not so much for them to be convinced, but as long as they can see that there is a return on that part of the investment, I think they can be convinced, and that's where Edge kind of helps in showing that business case in that end. And finally, if you look at it from a home buyer's perspective, if you can show the bank that there are lower default on loans when it's green, that's all they want to hear, because that straight away would mean they would find a way to, they won't even need any concession money. They'll see the value of that immediately. So I think that's really where it is. Now, coming back to the design process part, right? All this is assuming there's a cost. But in most cases, if the design process is led well and done sensibly, there could actually be no cost at all. In fact, by making good decisions, you could actually get lower cost. To give you an example, reducing the window areas, you see these days a lot of impatient capital architecture, as they call it, a lot of glass, cookie cutter kind of glass buildings. If you have less glass and more wall, typically wall is cheaper than glass, so that's sort of, I'm looking at the facade engineer. I hope I'm right there. But
if you're saying even the capital cost,
exactly, even the capex could actually be lower. Now that changes it quite a lot. If the bank can see that this adds no tax or a premium, that changes the whole case, right? That means that the banks can then push the industry rather than wait for the industry to ask. They can push the industry knowing that there are ways that the industry can figure out through good passive design processes, that they can find solutions that are cheap enough without increasing any cost, or at least cost neutral. Right?
Typically, the risks that the financier took were actually cost overruns, right, and time overruns, right. And in fact, that's really where the bank starts really stressing out, because typically cost and time means more interest and actually more fees and more all the other bits that roll up, and then suddenly you have a 90-80% built project that's run out of money and sitting there. And do you put more money in as a bank? Do you not? And typically they're very scared about those things. Now if you look deeper back there, actually it's all about running a great project, right? If running a great project is that discipline up front to make sure that you've got anticipating all this overruns, you've built in a good contingency, you've got the right consulting phase, so you can actually absorb some time and cost. And actually what this discipline does for us is actually upfront monitoring. I mean, I've got one of my consultants in the room somewhere. That upfront monitoring and actually that discipline of monitoring cost and money and time straight away, right from the beginning, actually de-risks the project for us. And we've been able to demonstrate, at least to my bank, that whenever they've come for a report or whatever, we've actually been proactive. We're actually sending monthly PM reports to them straight away. And basically we actually only have a conversation once a year. And for them, because we've de-risked the project straight off. So I think not just from the capex, but that intangible discipline that the bank will be happy to support us, because we've been very transparent as well, not just to outsiders outside the project, but to all the stakeholders, including our consultants. So suddenly it becomes a very different conversation, when you're making decision making. So I think upfront, I mean, coming back to the theme of the thing, just looking back, efficient properties is not just from the building itself, but it's from the mindset, if I can put it that way.
So an efficient design and then construction process enables the overall project to be more efficient.
And you need a catalyst, and I think that's what the sustainability rating and the process has done for us. It's catalyzed.
It adds a discipline.
Yeah, it's actually made this stuff happen. Not that we ever wanted to, but it's kind of become that little extra thing in the recipe that makes it happen.
To my panelists, a general question. If you were able to change one thing about the designs that you see to make them more efficient and to make your projects more successful, speaking to the third of the audience who are designers of some sort in the built environment, what would you want to see them change?
It needs to look nice, but I think it also needs to be as practical as possible. So it's important to make sure that all the consultants are involved and make sure that we're in line with, I guess, whatever certification it is, making sure you have that ahead of time. So practicality, I think.
In Tatu City, for example, we have 449 plot owners who are going to build their houses in the next 2-3 years. And one of the challenges we face is that they don't even know anything about green building for the most of them. And what we would like to see is where consultants across the board are more educated on green buildings and take it more seriously, as opposed to as being a good thing to have on your CV perhaps as an accredited professional or as a green building expert, but people who practically try to help their clients to achieve their sustainability goals within their projects.
this architecture of impatient capital, which is aluminium facades and glass buildings that I see everywhere around. That's kind of a self-fulfilling thing, because people build, they buy, there's a whole circle there. That needs to be cracked. If that could be changed in some way, and I don't think it's just it's everybody blames the other. So if you ask the architect, they say that's what the developer wants. If you ask the developer, that's what the funder wants, and the funder says the clients want this. And so it's it's also the CBRE and JLL crowd that want this. So it's sort of predictable. I can understand the need for, the world has changed. It has to be faster, it has to be cheaper, and it has to be predictable. But there must be a way to kind of not do that, right? And I think that would be one.
To break the cycle of inappropriate design.
Correct, yeah. But on the designer side as well, I feel that there are two sides of this, right? One is that on the designer side, I think they make the assumption that somebody needs to stop this, and I think that the designers, there is a process, but it doesn't take that much more to make something contextual, right? And I think through their experience and their 5 years of learning and the practice, they should be able to evolve, the patterns that work for that city, especially the local ones. And I think not assuming that the flashy brochure is the key thing to convince this client, kind of working a little bit on alternatives that work. And then also not jumping on, going for common sense things, because if you go for the flashy ones immediately, then even if the client goes for it, then they will regret it, and then it'll set a whole process. I remember solar hot water systems in South Africa. There was a whole stigma around it because somebody somewhere got these plastic ones that didn't make sense, and they had this whole bias against it. I think that's another one. I see green roofs as one of them. Sort of, it's coming. You can see that they are already struggling to maintaining it. But so instead of that, just simple stuff which doesn't even need a lot more gimmicky stuff. Just managing better facade, flow plates, better orientation. The client need not even know about it. It could be integrated. Mm-hmm. That would be great to see too.
Remember one thing, what are we passionate about, right? Why are we doing this? Is this just a job? So I'm just coming back to design. The most fun, so I guess the point I'm making is the most fun I have with my architects is when we're actually building inside out almost. So it's like, does that bedroom work? Is the hotel switch at this level? Is the bathroom a little big? And that kind of design conversation leads to actually the practical thing Prashant was talking about, the utility of the whole thing. Because somebody's got to use that space. Somebody's got to enjoy that space. Otherwise, why are we building crap then? Sorry for want of a better word. I don't want to swear, but if you actually start from inside out, right? And then suddenly the grid sizes start making sense. And if you've got your grid size coming down into your parkings, they're much more efficient. Your columns start making more sense because you don't have this wonderful, column right in the middle of your living room, because that to me is just literally a building that's been built the other way around, that we've got a nice flashy outside, and then inside, you come in and suddenly, you go, oh dear, I can't put my dining table in that place, or, in the middle of your shower, you suddenly have this wonderful nook that exists for no other reason. Then you put some of your toiletries there because actually we forgot about it, type of stuff. So the most fun we have is, and I'd love to see this happening more and more, is please start inside. Please start with the users of the building, all of us in other words. And again, be very practical and work your way out, and it can happen. It doesn't.
That leads into my next question, which was going to be to speak to the other developers and building owners, project promoters who were in the room. From your experience in terms of the benefit of efficient design and looking at efficient build process, how would you want your fellow building developers to help us change the way the industry works in East Africa?
I don't view our industry as competitive, to be very honest. It's not like I build an office block and I hate the office block that's been built next door because they're going to steal my tenant type of conversation, right? I think our almost, not duty, but I think we can all help each other if we build better quality. So I'd really try and talk to, even if you're building your own little house, or you're the biggest guy who's building, your AVIC building so many towers and, $200 million project. I want it to be a quality project. Then only we can drive the conversation higher to actually not talk about, cutting each other's throats, for want of a better word, but actually educate the end user to say, hey, quality is better. And let's build that quality conversation is the one thing I'd like to see all of us do. Only then we can, win with our consulting bases, our suppliers who can, bring and make us all benefit. The JLLs of this world, can help, market these projects better as well. So, again, just please let's talk more about quality in whatever small respect we can. Especially with our contractors, if I can put it that way as well. Because I think typically we just had a coffee conversation this morning about a building that has to be torn down. It shouldn't happen.
If this conversation is driven more by clients, because it's easier for end users to demand green or efficient buildings than it is for consultants and developers to try and impose on end users. And a practical example is we recently were trying to pursue someone to come and put up an office building within Tatu City, and they asked, do you have any green certification? What are you doing and what can we see? And that forced us to now have a conversation with Elizabeth and her team and start thinking about how can we get a green certification, how do we go about it? And this is because it came from an end user perspective, and now it has forced us into that conversation and to do something about it. But if we went and tried to start a conversation with a lot of them, at first their first reaction is opposition. And then now it takes longer to try and convince them about the benefits. And when it comes from the other side, I think things are going to move a lot faster.
I know we like to blame the architect for all his for all the problems, but I think even looking at the consultants, the quantity surveyor especially, making sure that he has cost in mind and making sure that the building is as efficient, materials, maybe acquisitions are cheaper, just getting more consultants, more involved, maybe getting someone like Web Limited or an expert in the team, because I think they come after. And I think they should be incorporated just to make it, everyone is aware of the training, what do you have to think of, so that we stop blaming the architect as well and move to the other consultants, because the mechanical, the electrical, they're the ones acquiring different components of the building. They can assist. They can think, okay, what else is cheaper but efficient as well? I mean, in our warehouse, we had an issue of dual flush. I mean, who thought the type of toilet you get is more efficient than another? I didn't know that. So I think it's important to start the process early and get everyone involved as early as possible.
The main aim is operating cost, right? And I think if you take the example of hotels, and especially in developing countries, it's highly sensitive. It's 15%, 10%. We monitor this. We do a lot of hotel investments, and they really struggle because it really hurts the bottom line. Both in terms of profitability, it's straight coming out of the profits, right? When they pay for these bills. So, the main thing is that if they can make sure that this is the maintenance and things is fed up to the design level in some way, and maybe this is where the Kenyan Green Building Council can help. I'm just wondering whether it's possible, starting with something small, maybe with the sector, doesn't need a huge statistically macro level data, but something where you've got 10 projects disclosed, maybe with the, which hotel or whatever is missing, but just a Chatham House kind of system, where people can actually start to understand what is happening, what is our benchmark for Nairobi, what is our empirical benchmark. That may start to bring a sense of, okay, why am I worse than the next 4-star, across, that maybe would help. And that could also inform the design team. See, that's really the critical thing.
Gathering the data. We were having a conversation just early this morning about the transition that's happened in South Africa from the establishment of the Green Buildings Council in maybe 10, 11 years ago, and how the whole thinking of sustainable green building measures has become much more embedded into the general design process in South Africa. There's been a transition from it being just one or two sort of bespoke or boutique buildings who are trying to get the green badge into it becoming much more embedded, partly through regulation, partly through changes in design. Maybe one or two of you would like to answer. Do you think that's possible in the East African market, that we'll actually go from seeing just these one or two buildings which are badged green buildings with whether it's LEED or EDGE or Green Star certification, into it being something that's seen as a normal part of design and implementation of projects, Do you think it's possible for us to see that change in our construction industry? And if so, when will we see it become normal?
It's possible, but I think we also need to demystify this whole green certification concept. It sounds so hard, but yet it's not. It's simple, it's easy, and I've seen it with IFC Edge. It's actually easier than the other rating systems. So I think it's about just demystifying the whole process and making sure the players in the industry understand it, because they will be the drivers to the government, because government always comes behind in this case. But I think it's possible.
Judging by the energy of the people in the Kenya Green Building Council, I've been to quite a few, and I think this is one that has pure passion and has been there for a while, and I've been coming. So I think if there's any place in East Africa, in East Africa, but also in Africa, where it will really take off, this has got to be it, And I think just this event and how much each of you contribute, and I think really great to see this actually. So well done, and hats off to you.
Who cares about a plastic bag anymore in this room? There's such a huge debate. Those bottles are going to go in 6 months. All right? We're all going to be walking around. I think, Matt, when you do the next space conference, you're going to give us a water bottle to walk around with. I've seen it happening already in conferences around the world now. I actually now consciously keep one in my car. Yeah. So the point being is that it's a culture change, right? You're asking for that mindset shift. And just calling this conference not the Green Building Conference, just calling it the Space Conference, Sustainable Property. Who's not interested in that? So I think if back to Karen's point, if there's a method, and I think the KGBS can do it, is to get it of a culture change of saying, hey, it's just normal part of life. It'll take off very quickly.
Great.
And just that plastic bag ban is just evidence as to how fast a mindset can change. From complaining about not having plastic bags to actually saying we shouldn't have them anywhere.
Green buildings is good because it makes a few people in the building slightly better, and maybe it saves somebody some money in terms of efficiency. But fundamentally, it has to be about the greater good, right? And it really adds up. When you have majority doing it, it really doesn't do much when you have a few projects here or there. And I think for a transformation to happen, and I'm quite serious, it is, I agree that I think in 5 years, for sure, we'll have majority of, or at least new construction, which is the opportunity doing it. I'm already hearing the government quite keen on pushing this. I see sort of large projects that are looking at this. The clients we speak to, Godfrey's here, we don't seem to have, as a financier, no pushback. They seem to be getting it. So I think, there is that, but I think it'll take a lot more effort, a joint effort of the design teams, the developers, building owners to really transform it. I think it takes but we've got all the science here.
Thank you very much to our panel, and thank you for those positive comments. The cultural change is possible.